All right, welcome back everyone to another Educate webinar. My name is Liana and I'm the community manager on our Educate team. And joined with me is Adam Davis, our senior customer success engineer. And he's going to walk through the entire settings panel in studio today. And then we're actually going to open it up to an Ask Me Anything type of format with you all. So please send all of the questions that you guys have for Adam in the Q&A box in the webinar so that way we can answer all those after the walkthrough. But with that being said, I'll pass it over to Adam to get started.
All right. Hello. This one is going to be an interesting one because it's kind of utilitarian, right? And we're just going to go through the settings panel and talk about what things mean and what they do and all of that. So behind the panel, studio settings and Ask Me Anything presented by me, Adam Davis. So yeah, we're going to, I'm the senior customer success engineer here at Ceros, and there's my face. And then this is it. Two things walking through the settings panel and then questions and answers. So I'm gonna get out of this and go over here to my Ceros studio where I have nothing on the canvas because all we're gonna do is click the gear icon to launch the settings panel and go through it. The first thing you're gonna see is experience settings. The title, pretty self-explanatory. When you create an experience from the admin, you type a title in and that's what's gonna be in here. And you see it up here in the top left corner after your folder name, your project folder name. But you can change that, of course. You know, if you go in later, you can change it, type something else after it, whatever you need to do. And then right off the bat, you're going to have an experience URL too. So that's sometimes what we'd refer to as the experience slug, the last part of the URL. So everything is going to be always view.ceros.com/your account slug, and then your experience slug or your experience URL after that. And you can change this too, and that influences what the URL is. So if you've got a vanity domain, for example, which we talk about like right here, it can be something.yourwebsite.com/whatever this is. So /settings or whatever it is. And so one thing we see a lot though with this is if you make a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, you'll end up with like that kind of thing in there. And like maybe sometimes a 2 and a 3. So and that gets kind of confusing. So just want to highlight that real quick. And your URL can get really long and very not human friendly. So if you do end up with something like that, you can easily go in there and just change it to something more easy to manage. So this is just information right here. Like I said, this is what your URL structure is going to look like. You can, if I change this to like, I don't know, copy, and if I hit OK, that would update. Like if I go back into it, we'll see that reflected right there. So then we have match page names to title. This one is sometimes confusing to people. We get questions about it every so often, with the expectation being that the page name is going to be like appended to the end of the URL, but that is not the case. When you check this box, match page names to title, that's going to take your page names if you have them. So over here, I guess I'm gonna jump in and out of the settings panel a little bit. So untitled page, if you haven't ever entered a name in your page or for your page, let's just say untitled, and you won't see anything. So if I say, I don't know, I can just call it page 1, right? I can type page 1 in there. And so if I were to check this box, match page names to title, it gives you a little tooltip right there. So you'll see this in the browser tab, right? Or the browser up here, right? So if the name of my experience is called settings, it would be like settings and then page 1 would be appended to that. So that's what we're doing. We're taking the name of the page and appending that to the title of the experience that you see in the browser tab. It doesn't have anything to do with the URL. So then over here, this is just information. Like this is kind of saying this is what your URL is going to look like the experience URL, meaning whatever's in that box. And my.domain.com is your vanity domain. And then the learn more link is going to go off to our educate article about vanity domains and how to set those up. Restrict access. These you may or may not have. These are features that can be turned on. So the simple password protection feature, it's a shared password for everybody. So if I click that and I put like 1, 2, 3, 4 in there, that's the password that everyone's going to use to access this content. So you share it out and say the password is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can see it. Then we've got accessible with company login only. This is SSO protection. So if you check that box, publish the experience, and you have this set up, anyone who lands on it is going to be prompted with a similar password screen, but instead of a password, it's going a similar screen to the password, but instead of a password, it's going to be asking you for an email address. And when that's put in, it gets routed through your single sign-on, you get authenticated, and then you can see the content. So nobody outside of your organization would be able to see that that page. So this is really geared towards internal comms, not really for third parties, right? If you can authenticate, if your SSO can authenticate other organizations, then that's cool. You could do that. But in general, it's mainly meant for internal communication that would be limited to your company. And so right here, if you hover over that little info icon, you get a tooltip about what that does. Unsupported browsers with a redirect URL. This one, and don't quote me on this because I'm not a product manager or anything, but this one I think could probably go away in the near future because most browsers these days are going to be able to display Saros content. The only ones that can't would be browsers that you wouldn't be able to even download anymore, like very old versions of Edge and Internet Explorer, which I mean, I haven't said Internet Explorer in a very long time. So, but that's what this is for. So if somebody happens to be on a super old browser and it doesn't render the Saros experience very well or at all, then you can give them an alternate URL that they get sent to instead of seeing that Saros experience that won't load for them in that old antiquated vintage browser that they might be using. Document language. You can specify like the language tag that's used in the content. It defaults to English. So if you've got, and this is relevant for translating, or if Google is translating it, like if you have Chrome, you can have the browser just do that by itself if you want. So if I say this is French, the browser and other platforms, other translation tools are going to know, okay, this is French. And if they're in the US, maybe they want to see it in English because they're based on their location. So that's what that is. So that's the experience settings area. I'm going to pause here and look at some questions in the Q&A. So what platform updates are coming soon? I think we can handle these later on. Yeah, we can talk about that one. That's down the road a bit. The one where it says when the Figma style will be available to use, that one might need to ask that a different way. I'm not sure I understand that one. And then do you need to set up a redirect when changing the URL? That's a great one. No, you do not need to set up a redirect when changing the experience URL. So if you have published this and it says, and the URL ends in settings, right? And then if you go back in and change it to something else and somebody visits the page with that old URL slug at the end of settings, Saros will automatically redirect you to the new URL. Unless you go back and create another piece of content that ends in the experience URL or experience slug of settings. So if you use that previous experience slug for something else, then that will have a piece of content tied to it, of course. And so you'll go there. You obviously won't get redirected. So it's only if you've changed it and you haven't reused that experience URL or that experience slug. So that was a good one. All right. So going on to SEO, this is always a hot topic among almost everyone. And we've added a couple different things here in the last few months. So the way this is worded has always been a little interesting to me because SEO is search engine optimization, right? So it's interesting to say enable search engine optimization, you know, so, but it's just semantics. But so what these are doing, this one doesn't add any meta tags at all. So we're enabling SEO for both published experiences and embeds. What this means is the content is able to be crawled under any scenario, any context, whether it's embedded or if it's standalone. So we don't put any restrictions on how the content is crawled or if it's crawled. So there's no need to put any kind of meta tags on it. It just says it's open, you can crawl it, doesn't matter. Then this one is the new one that we've added that says enable SEO for embeds only. What this is doing in the background is adding a relatively new meta tag. I think it came out in 2018, so it's not that new, but it's adding the index if embedded meta tag to the page. And that directs the search engines to only index it if it is embedded in another page. Very, very straightforward meta tag, index if embedded. So if you're only embedding the Saros experiences on your website, this is the one you want to use. Disable SEO is going to add a no index, no follow meta tag to the page. And that says, don't index this page. Pretty straightforward. Title keywords. This is one that gets misused a lot as well. So it's an interesting field that you probably don't need to use. So a lot of the time, what we see in here, since it says title keywords, it is a bit misleading. And so we see comma separated keywords in here, and that is bad. That in the world of SEO would be called keyword stuffing or something along those lines. We're just packing your content full of these keywords that you want the content to rank for instead of having everything built into the content. Back in the day, people used to do that with, like, if the page was white, they'd put a giant block of keywords and have the font white, you know, to try to like trick it and you know, rank for other things if they don't have those words in the content itself. But that's not what this is for. So don't put a comma separated list of words in there. You can think of this as the title for search engines in a way. So you've got the experience title, right? In this case, it's settings. And that's the title that you see in the browser tab. If I were to publish this, that's what you'd see. But if I go over here and I type behind the panel, then in the browser, you're going to see settings dash behind the panel. So the title keyword, whatever you put in here, title keywords, that's going to be appended to the end of the title. And that is also what you'll see in Google searches or other search engines. So when you see like in Google, for example, the dark blue bold heading, it would say settings dash behind the panel. So it's if you have a title and your title is pretty simple, maybe you don't want it to be super long just for organization in the admin, but you want a longer title when it comes up in search results, then that's where you can kind of enhance or add to the title. Meta description is the description that you see under the heading in the search engine results. So it's just telling the search engine what the page is about. So you see the title, then you'll see the description right under that. If you don't put anything in here, it can pull from random parts of the content. Like, we have no control over what Google does. And so it could pull from somewhere that isn't relevant. You could have some random text in there. Most of the time, it's going to pull something from the beginning, like the first piece of text on the page, but not always. So if you are doing standalone content, it's always good to populate this with something that describes what the content is. If you are embedding, this is not relevant and this is not relevant either. You don't need to put anything in there. It doesn't hurt if you do, but these are not used at all when you're embedding, because all of that metadata is going to come from the parent page where the Saros experience is embedded. Canonical URL, this one's super important too when you're embedding. We give you a little bit of info about what this is, specify the URL to which this experience should give SEO credit, use a full URL with the protocol in front of it like HTTPS and the full path. So this says, this is the URL for this content. That's what a canonical URL is. So its main purpose is for dealing with duplicate content. Like if you've got UTM parameters or other parameters at the end of a URL that all go to the same place, you don't want those other URLs to be ending up in Google search results, outranking the actual URL of the page with nothing added to it. So we use it though to avoid the view.saros.com/your account/the experience URL ending up in the search results. And so it's what you'd want to do is put the URL of the page where the Saros content exists. So when the search engine crawls the page, it says, okay, this is on view.saros.com, but it's telling me that I should use https www.yourwebsite.com/something. And so, okay, I'll use that in the search result instead. And that's important if the Saros experience ends up getting indexed outside of the context of the parent page. But it doesn't always happen. So SEO is very, it's a very interesting thing. And it seems like there aren't any like hard scientific facts or phenomena that go on that are the same all the time, right? So the canonical URL is a strong suggestion, and it's respected probably 99.99% of the time. But there can be times where it is and where it isn't, right? So if your domain authority is very strong and you forget the canonical URL, you'll probably be fine. But if you've got an instance where you forget it and then somehow the view.saros.com URL gets out into the world and gets searched and comes up, that can start outranking the page where the content actually lives, and that's not good. So it's always good to put that in there. And we've also seen cases where like I can count on one hand the times this has happened. Someone has a canonical URL, but it's not respected, and you still see that view.saros.com URL coming up in search results. We don't control what Google does. We can do our best to put these measures in place, saying index only if it's embedded. This is really enhancing things though. Before we only had the canonical URL, and so this is kind of a extra layer of protection. So if you've got this checked and a canonical URL, we can pretty much say that you're good, and like the Saros URL is not going to come up at all. But we've seen a handful of cases over the years where something happens to where the view.saros.com URL is getting searched and it's coming up despite that being in there. So just keep that in mind. Google searches, they're in SEOs, it's kind of its own thing that we don't have any influence over. We can do our best. We can put these settings in place, but ultimately it's up to how those search engines work. The NoScript HTML, this one is kind of antiquated as well. The origin story of the NoScript HTML is from back in the day when JavaScript was in its infancy. Not all browsers could run JavaScript, or not all versions of certain browsers. Like maybe you had not updated your version of Netscape in a while, or Mosaic or whatever it was, and it couldn't run JS. So there was this element called the NoScript element, and you could have kind of a more basic, watered down, simple version of the site that doesn't do all the fancy JavaScript stuff. And that was a fallback for browsers that don't support JavaScript. We generate a NoScript HTML automatically for Saros content. It is still relevant because search engines crawl it and use that. And it comes into play with Saros because anything that's on the canvas that's hidden, right? If you have some text in a text box, like a tabbed layout or a carousel, something like that, or you see one thing and then other stuff is hidden and you have to get to it or click something to show it. The search engines are not going through and clicking on things and looking at the content like that, like a human would. They're just seeing it the way you'd see it initially. So that text doesn't exist in the browser until it's shown, but it does exist in the NoScript, which the search engines crawl. So if you do have hidden content that is getting crawled because it's in the automatically generated NoScript HTML that Saros generates without you having to do anything. This box is here because back in the day, we didn't have features to allow you to add H1, H2, H3 tags or other semantic HTML elements that you can do now with the text tool or with the accessibility features. And so some of our clients wanted to have a more like robust page and have those tags. And the only way to do that would be to come up with a NoScript HTML and put all those H1s in there with it. And we don't have to do that anymore. So this is really kind of vestigial going the way of the dinosaur kind of thing. You probably don't have to worry about it. All right. I'm going to pause again, looking at a couple different things. Okay, for SEO. Oh, wait, here we go. Oh man, I missed a bunch of them. If I'm using Saros for non-full page experiences and just want to embed a small, like a little micro content on a page, yes, you would still want to use the SEO panel, check enable SEO for embeds only, and put the page that the content is embedded on right here in the canonical URL. Does the name of the asset affect anything? Assuming asset is the Saros experience, so the title doesn't really affect any. Yeah, the title does affect things. Sorry. So the name or the title of the Saros experience is what is going to come up in search results if you don't add anything in here. So if this was indexed in Google, the link in that search result page would say settings and to go to this page. Can you password protect specific pages of the experience? That's a good question. And the answer is no, but that's a cool idea. To get around that, you could just create a different experience, link out to it, and password protect that. Is the default? Yes, the default SEO setting is going to be enable SEO for both published experience and embed. So that just adds, it doesn't add any meta tags. It doesn't restrict how the content is crawled. And we'll get to the custom HTML. You can add HTML to any experience that you create, and it can affect the experience in many different ways. And we can talk about that. Setting up SSO for company login only, going back to this one. That you'd want to reach out to your CSM and get that set up. There's a cost associated with that most of the time, depending on your contract. I don't know anything about contracts, so I can't talk about pricing. And then enable SEO for published URLs. And can you enable SEO for published URLs and not embedded content? Yeah, so you would just use the first option for that. All right, social. This is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you're sharing the Saros experience on Facebook or Twitter or somewhere else, like LinkedIn is a common one, and other platforms are going to use OG tags, Open Graph tags, right? So Facebook is not the only platform that uses those. So you would add a title there and a description that is specific to that. So that's your OG title, your OG description, or your OG image. So you can have it be something other than the automatically generated thumbnail that you see that pulls like from the top, the top part of the experience. So it's like a 16:9, like kind of screenshot of the top of the content that gets used if you don't specify something. And Twitter just has its own format for their metadata, so it's different. The same thing though, title, image, and description. So these are what's pulled when you share on social media. Custom HTML. This is a giant text box where you can put code in and anything added here, like it says, is going to be added before the closing body tag. So this is going to be code that gets added directly to the index.html file that's behind the Saros experience. And that gets added directly to the page. So the use cases for things like this, I think the most common one is going to be adding like different Saros SDK plugins, but you can do a lot of other stuff with it. If you have some dependencies for like an embedded form or something, or some other third-party element that you're adding using the embedded object tool, which I can't get to because I have this blue drop assets here on my canvas and I had to reset. So if you're using this and you put something in here, if it doesn't run right away, you might need to rearrange the code a little bit. Maybe it has a JavaScript file that needs to fire and be there before another part of the code. So there's a lot of different reasons why you might want to put things in here. You can put tracking pixels, tracking strips into this. So any additional code that needs to be added to the experience, CSS for like styling a form could be added in there. So yeah, that's what that's for, and it can be used for all kinds of different things. Performance tab. These are useful and not useful at the same time. So progressive image loading. If you've been on a call with me before, or if I've communicated with you, I'm probably going to say, I think these should be swapped. And we're talking to our product team about that too. So here's what they do. Progressive image loading. Hover over the thing, it shows you a tooltip. So display the experience earlier with low resolution images while the higher resolution versions load in the background. Sounds cool. So what's going on is you land on the page, and if you're on a slower connection, maybe you're on your phone or the computer's not that great or whatever, you're going to see kind of a lower res. And then as things load in, it's going to improve that and be more clear as everything loads. But these days, most of the time, everything is really fast. Like we've come a long way from the iPhones of 2007, and even LTE data is pretty fast. So this, I think, could be shut off for 99% of scenarios. And lazy loading should always be on. So lazy loading says prioritize loading and displaying content for the current viewport, meaning what you see in the browser before scrolling down, right? What you initially see, and everything else is going to be loaded in afterwards. That makes sense. That's lazy loading, right? So it prioritizes what you're going to see with your eyes right off the bat, gets that ready. And why would you not want that? So that's kind of our position right now with our product team. It's like, we should just not even have an option for it and just have it do that, not make our clients have to check a box to improve the perceived load time, right? So going back to this though, this can kind of be a bad thing, because what it's doing is loading, like it says, lower resolution images and then higher resolution images. So what's going on is it's loading up to 4 different copies of an image at varying quality levels, and that increases like the amount of elements on the page. And it might be doing that really quickly, but it can increase the requests being made and kind of slow things down, or make a page speed test tell you that the content takes 20 seconds to load when it doesn't. So I would experiment with this one if you might not need it. So that should be off by default, and this should be on by default, in my opinion. And I'm just one person. All right. Before we go to accessibility, we'll talk about some Q&A questions. Will there be new SDK plugins that you can release with documentation? Yeah, I mean, there could be. I can't say if there will be or not. I'm sure we'll make some new SDK plugins at some point. But the ones that are out there right now are the ones that are there. I don't know. I can't think of any that are in the works. There are a few that we've written that we don't have public yet, because they're kind of edge case, solving some stuff that doesn't come up a whole lot. And we just send those out as needed if the issue comes up. But those could be put out. But yeah, they're more utilitarian, kind of specific. But yeah, so will there be new SDK plugins? I probably, but couldn't tell you what those might be. What image file type would I recommend looks best in a Saros experience? That's a good question. Kind of a lot to it. The file type. So if it's a simple graphic with not a whole lot of detail, like a logo or something, you could do a PNG or an SVG. What you don't want to do is put a photograph in as a PNG, because PNG is compressed, but it's not. It's when you look up the definition, it's going to tell you it's an uncompressed file format, which is true. So when you save like a photo as a PNG, it's going to have a lot more detail to it and be a lot larger than a JPEG. So the JPEG compression is meant for photos, and it'll compress it way more than a PNG does, but still maintain that quality. So JPEGs for photos, PNGs for simple graphics, SVGs for small icons, logos, things like that. If you get to something where it's like a map of the world or a detailed map of a country with like all kinds of little, like if the country's bordered by a river or something, and you've got a lot of little things going on, or if it's just a super detailed SVG, that I would turn into a PNG, because the browser has to render all of that. So SVG, scalable vector graphic, it's a vector, right? So in your mind, it's like, oh, vectors are good. They're lightweight. They're gonna maintain their resolution at whatever size they are. And yeah, that's true. It's great. SVGs are great. But once you make them very, very detailed, the browser can have trouble rendering that, or it can take time to do it, rather. A lot of little paths that the browser has to draw in order to see the image. Whereas with a PNG or a JPEG, it's just one file. There it is on the screen. It's loaded. I've come across situations where people have put like photographs inside an SVG. So the whole photo is like base 64 encoded, and it's like a 20 meg SVG. So that's not good. That's going to slow you down. 15-page experience with many images. Would lazy loading help? Yes. So lazy loading will always help get that content in front of your face the quickest. So the way Saros works is if lazy loading is on, you've got the initial viewport that you see that gets loaded. That's the priority. And then it loads page 1, loads page 2, and then goes down the line. If you land on page, if you have a 10-page experience and you land on page 5, we load the viewport on page 5, load page 5, and load page 4 and 6. So it's kind of loading the adjacent pages first, and because we don't know where your user is going to end up, but most of the time you're going to go to like the next page or the previous page. But then all the other ones are loaded in the background as well. So if you've got a 10-page experience, you start on page 1, that content is loading in the background. So if somebody is navigating from like page 2 to page 10 is ready to go when they get there. All right, dang. So are there any pieces of hardware that play nice with Saros? Photoshop and the wheel accessory. I don't know. That's a good one. I don't have any personal experience, but maybe somebody else does. I just use the old Magic Mouse, but I used to use a Microsoft mouse and everything was fine. Difference between a vector and a path. A vector graphic is made of paths. So, and I guess you could call a path a vector. So they're kind of the same. Vector is made of paths, but if you just have like one line, you could call that a vector, but it's also a path. Shouldn't some of these account settings be default account settings? Yes, I agree. Some of them should, like accessibility or cookie compliance. And we are talking about that too with the product team. DPI, DPI and things like that they're important, and our official recommendation is to do things kind of 2-up from what you would normally do to account for Retina screens. But yeah, 144 is good. But yeah, so that's fine. So yeah, let's go on to accessibility in back into the settings panel. Right now it's turned off for this content. It's off by default. Maybe we should have it turned on by default, right? But so turning this on is going to open up a bunch of different things related to groups and text boxes for the most part. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on. And then I hit OK. It's going to reload the studio for you since you've turned on a feature set that wasn't there before. And if I make a text box, these you get, right? You get the paragraph, you get the H1 through H6 with the regular text tool. But then you've got also hide from screen readers now. You've got an ARIA attribute, which you don't really need on a text box, but it's an element in Saros that can have an interaction on it, which is why you can add an ARIA label to it, but you probably never will. And then if you have a group, like if I throw this text box in a group, I can give it an HTML section like main, nav, article, header, footer, all those cool things. And then I can also add screen reader only text to that group, add an ARIA attribute to the group, and keep focus in the group, focus trapping, which we're working on improving right now. There's a little bit of an issue with it that we're working through. But so those are the extra options you get once you've turned on this switch, the accessibility switch. And then we've got skip to main content. The skip to main content link is something you'd only see if you've got a screen reader running, or if you are navigating using a tab, tabbing around keyboard navigation. So it looks like maybe you've seen it before, but it's on the upper left of the Saros experience, and it says skip to main content. That's what it says by default. You can add whatever you want there. It's this little black little tab that'll skip you down to the main content, right? And main content being whatever is inside your group that has the main tag on it. So if you don't have anything that has the main tag, you're not going to see the even if you have this checked, right? Even if you have this accessibility on, you're not going to see that skip to main content link because there's not a main element to skip to. So you'll only see that when there actually is a main or something that has the main tag on it. Zoom control overlay. So Saros is an interesting creature when it comes to zooming in and out. So because of the way the content is rendered, the browser zoom doesn't affect it. Maybe you've seen that. So if you're in your browser, you've got, you can hold down like control or command and go plus minus or do it manually. Like if you go up here to view, you can zoom in, zoom out. You can, if it's embedded or not, it doesn't matter. If the content's embedded though, you're zooming, the parent things on the parent page are getting larger and smaller, but the Saros embed is staying the same size. Same thing if it's standalone too, just nothing will happen. So the answer to that is having a zoom control overlay. That's going to live in the upper right, and it'll let people zoom up to 400%. And that is an acceptable way to do it, according to WCAG 2.0 standards. That's what I've been told. I'm not an accessibility expert, but that's the way around the browser zoom not working for Saros content. So back to the Q&A before we go to the cookie compliance setting. Okay, we've got an update on the assets. By assets, meaning layers in the layers panel. So elements on the Saros canvas, do the name of shapes and things affect SEO? No, they do not. What would though, if you have alt tags on images, those are read by search engines. So that's the only thing in the content that would really be outside of text and ARIA labels, things like that. The alt tag is going to make a difference, but this group being named group isn't going to influence anything as far as SEO goes. Do we have the ability to create a scrollable frame within a page? No, there are ways around that. You can show and hide. You kind of have a carousel kind of thing. So that's not a feature of Saros right now. A way to batch add tags for accessibility. I think you can. Let's see. I know you can do that with SDK tags if you're doing things with the SDK, but like, let's say I've got a bunch of squares on here. And for whatever reason, I want to, if let's say they do something and I want to add the same ARIA label to all of them. I've actually never tried this before. So the answer is no. So everything, if you wanted to add an ARIA attribute, you likely wouldn't be adding the same ARIA attribute to multiple things anyway, but it looks like the answer to that is no for that one. But hiding from screen readers could be like if you've got some text like over a button and the button says, you know, click here to download a report or whatever it is. And you've also got a hotspot over that with an ARIA label that says click here to download the report. You don't need to read that text again, right? So the screen reader will announce the ARIA label and doesn't need to read the text. So let's see if we can do that. Like if I've got the ability to add, like here's 2 text boxes. So yeah, if I wanted to hide both of these text boxes from screen readers, I can do that. If I want to make them all H2s, I can do that. So there's some things you can do if you select multiple things in the layers panel and apply settings to all of them. So that was a good question. Difference between alt tags and ARIA labels. So an ARIA label tells you, oh man, I wish I remembered the acronym off the top of my head. So ARIA it means something. But again, I'm not an accessibility expert, so I don't know what that is off the top of my head. But it's meant to tell you what something does. So if you've got a button, and you've got a hotspot over the button, like let's say the square is a button with some text on it, ARIA attribute, it would be like, here's something though, that we're getting out of the settings panel now and into just like general settings. ARIA label though, we're gonna stick with that. It would be like, click here to do something. So that's what it is. So it describes what a button does or what's with the functionality of something, and an alt tag tells you the content of an image. So that's the difference between an alt tag and an ARIA label. All right, we're going to go over to cookie compliance. This one's pretty simple, and it ties into a whole other topic of GDPR, cookies, things like that. Saros does not use cookies at all. Saros itself does not drop cookies, does not set cookies. We do not use cookies and have not for about 4 years. But the feature says cookie compliance. It's like saying Kleenex or facial tissue, right? Something like that. So Saros uses local storage to save a unique user ID, like a token, and a URL for tracking referrer data. So it saves those 2 things. We also capture IP addresses for geolocation, things like that. So there's no cookies being set, but the local storage values that we set and store are functionally the same thing as a cookie, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue, you know. Local storage value compliance, you know. So we just use the word cookie, but we mean the values set by local storage and the stuff that we store in the backend. So this is pretty simple though. Require user consent. If I check that box, that means everyone's being opted out of tracking by default. So I'm requiring consent, but if you don't have a way to manage that consent, the consent choice is false when you land on the page and you are not identified. And this goes back to Saros Analytics and the visitors metric. That's all that's affected here. So if I'm one visitor, I can view a page 5 times. That's 1 visitor, 5 opens, right? So if I'm opted out of this tracking, or if you've checked the require user consent box, everyone's going to be unique. So like I'm one person, but I loaded the content 5 times. So I'm going to show up as 5 different visitors for those 5 opens. That's the only metric that's affected. because there's not anything saved in the browser to say, oh, I've been here before. So if that's there, the only thing that's affected is so it says it disables analytics cookies, analytics, local storage keys and values, and ensures some analytics data will not be tracked, aka the visitors metric, until user consent is granted. So that's all it pertains to, the visitors metric in Ceros Analytics. And then, so right here, you've got integrate with a CMP. If you use OneTrust, CookieBot, any of those other ones, TrustArc, any kind of CMP, any code added in here is going to be added to the head tag of the page. So typically those scripts need to be run right away when the page loads before anything else. So it's in the head. So this is where your OneTrust script would go. And this only applies if you are doing standalone Ceros content. If you are embedding the Ceros page, you would not want to put anything in here. And if you do, you might see the cookie banner display on the parent page and inside the Ceros embed, which you probably don't want. You only need it to do it one time. So you can manage consent for the Ceros Analytics tracking for the visitors metric outside of Ceros 2 on the parent page and message that in. That's a whole thing. So if you're embedding, you don't need to do anything with this. All you'd have to do if you're doing anything with cookies or consent, just check that require user consent box. And yeah, this is one of those settings where it would be great if it was account level. So you can apply that to all of your content across the board and not have to remember to go in there. Or if your organization has changed their policies and now you've got to go back to all your Ceros content and like go into each studio and check that box, not super fun. So it would be great if this was an account level thing. And I've brought that up to our product team a few times. So hopefully we can do that at some point in the future. Then editor, this one's straightforward. Oh, I'm forgetting. I'm gonna look at the Q&A. Is there a way to change the look and feel of the cookie pop-up window? So yes, the answer to that is yes, at face value, yeah. So, but it depends where it comes from. So you can create a cookie banner in Ceros using Ceros elements and the SDK, or you can have it come in from a CMP like OneTrust. And if it's coming from OneTrust, you can control the styling in OneTrust. So there's nothing in Ceros that you would do to manage what that looks like. But if you're creating something in Ceros using Ceros elements, obviously you can make the cookie banner look however you want. So yeah, good question. Editor. So this one's pretty straightforward, pertaining to the editor product that we have, where you can have some designers that are creating these pages and then pass them off to other people that can just change certain parts of it, right? So pretty straightforward though. All content is editable, some is editable, or you can't edit anything. Not sure what the, so it, I'm about to say I'm not sure why we even have that option, but so you can use this to exclude this experience from the editor so nobody can use it. But so some content is editable, right? So if you have this and I go in here and look at one of these text boxes, I can say editor settings. All right, this one you can edit, but this one, no, you can't. So that's pretty straightforward in the editor settings. And then administrator only, we're not gonna go in there because no one in here is an administrator, so you don't have this. But that's the settings panel. I think that's it. Oh, here's a good question. If we change from all content is editable to no content is editable, will it update? I don't know. Let's see. So this one is checked. This one's not. It's I'll type something in it. All right. And now if I go back in and say it's not editable. Yeah, so we just, I'm on the group, sorry. Yeah, so it just removes that altogether. So there's no options to make it editable or not. So yeah, so the answer is yes, looks like. And you just can't open the experience at all in the editor when you do that. So I think we're at the point of the the just open forum for the Q&A. Let's put this back up just to have it, if I can find it again. Liana, I lost it. But I think that's not the worst thing that could happen. There it goes. So we're at the end now. So leave that up. Can we make any elements editable or no? Let's see. I think it just pertains to text. Well, it doesn't pertain to text boxes. So you can edit an image as well. So if I pull an image out of here, let me find one from the Getty. And so you have the ability to swap out images. Wow, where did it go? Went way over there. All right. And so if I go back in my settings and do this, some of it is editable. That's a word that sounds funny when you say it too many times. So yeah, you can edit that image. You can swap that image out. But a group, you do have it on the group, and groups being editable are very interesting because like you can apply that to everything in the group. And so there's that one's interesting to me because like if I have this text box, which is inside that group, and that text box isn't able to be edited, but the group can be. This one, I might have to go back and refresh my memory on, like the group can be edited, but does that mean that this text box can be, even though it's not checked? Hotspots. I should know this. You can't set it to be editable or not, but we can come back on to that one. Are hotspots editable? I should know that, and I feel embarrassed that I don't. All right. Okay, I missed a few though. Are our account reps the administrators? Yes. I think the answer to that is you could say that. Yeah. So a CSM or an account manager would be able to do things that someone in like with my same permission level could do. Like I can turn features on and off. They can turn features on and off. So you could call them an administrator. And we're getting another one. When I scroll through Studio, it's laggy. Any idea why? No, I do not have an idea why, because I'm not sitting at your computer and seeing what's going on. But that's cheeky, sorry. But there are just a lot of things it can be. So it's tough to say, oh yes, it's this, you know? So lots of things influence the studio kind of getting slow. The main things would be the size of the content, which is kind of ambiguous. If you have a Saros canvas that you've made like 30,000 pixels high, right? And you've got it 3,000 wide, and you've got it packed full of all kinds of stuff, that's going to run a bit slow. But if you have a simpler experience and maybe you've got a ton of browser tabs open, or your computer is like 8 years old and packed full of stuff and doesn't run very well, that's going to make the studio laggy too. So that's a tough question to answer, and it would be like a case-by-case basis thing. Feel free to email support@saros.com, and they can take a look at it and see if there's anything wrong with content that could be improved. A lot of the time we get that kind of issue in our inbox, and we look at it and we can navigate the studio just fine. And then we're like, okay, everything seems fine here. So are you on a VPN? Is your connection kind of compromised? Are you running a ton of stuff on your computer? You have a lot of browser tabs open, things like that. So that's what we're going to ask when everything looks okay on the surface, but our client is saying that it's running slow. We, by the way, are a fully remote team on our home internet connections. We don't have any kind of special like backdoor into Saros that's going to make things run faster than anybody else. We are accessing the studio and your experiences exactly the way you are. If you're at home, if you're in an office, then that isn't totally true, because you could be behind like a firewall or another or VPN. We're not on a VPN or anything like that. So we are looking at it just like anyone else on the internet would. So there's a couple things that I didn't answer because I wasn't sure what was being asked. So yeah, okay. The Figma style. When will the Figma style be available to be used? Meaning the studio showing all the formats at the same time. It sounds like that's referring to the next kind of iteration of the Serif Studio that we're working on. And I'm not sure on that. That's a product team question that I can ask. But we don't want to put a hard date on anything either, because you never know. Like we can't say, yes, this is going to be done in 3 months, and then there are some delays, like things happen, and we don't want to deliver on we don't want to make a promise that we can't keep, right? So that's always a tough one too. Like, when are things going to be available? All right. So the other question that I didn't answer yet was, I'm new at Serifs and I need to create a landing page, but you're not allowed to use an iframe. I'm requested to integrate the HTML. Where do I get the HTML from? Good question. So the Serifs embed code is all we have. So the Serifs embed code is the only way to get a Serifs experience onto a page. There is not any kind of static ball of HTML that you can grab and put onto a page and render the content. That's another thing that's going to be dealt with in the future. It'll be a different kind of embed code. Maybe not at first, but we're working towards moving away from iframes in the future. But so because that is something that comes up every so often. But yeah, so the options would be to use the Serifs embed code or view the Serifs page on its own, either on a vanity domain or directly with the Serifs URL. So, but yeah, if there's anything we can do, like to talk to your web team about that, feel free to submit a ticket and we can have that discussion. Usually there's a way. Anything is possible with enough work if people are willing to do it. And sometimes there are those barriers where your web team just says no, and that's it, you know. But it is technically possible to get a Serifs embed onto any web page, as long as the web page allows you to do that. Let's see. So vanity domains, vanity URLs. The question is, if you have I'm going to kind of paraphrase and interpret this. If you have a vanity URL, can you have the content use that URL all the time, no matter what, and have like the view.serifs.com URL go away? And the answer to that is no. There's not a way to generate the vanity URL, right? You generate it by typing it into a browser tab, a browser address bar, and hitting enter, or like typing it into an email and sending it to somebody. So like but yeah, you can't like copy it from anywhere or automatically use it. So it would just have to be like typed out manually and you go to the page that way. So the view.serifs.com URL will always be there. It'll always be available if somebody knows about it. But if you never share that out, it's as if it doesn't exist. Like if nobody knows about it, then it'll never get used. If you always use the vanity domain, then that's what the URL of the page is going to be. It would be cool though. So that's something that I personally would like to see. Like if somebody wants to all the time replace view.serifs.com / your account with the vanity URL, then yeah, that would be a great feature to have. Same with embed codes too. Like if you want to, you can use a vanity domain in an embed code if you need to or want to. There are some like technical things that that having the same domain as the parent page is going to help solve. But those are pretty rare, but you can do it. But it would be a manual update, right? You would just take your vanity domain and swap it in. But it would be cool to say, I want my embed code to use a vanity domain. And so if that's not already a feature request, we can put that in. How are we doing on time? I never look at the clock when I'm doing these.
Awesome. I think we're just about at time. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Adam, for going through the settings panel and going through every single detail. I know there's so much that, goes into the settings panel and we don't always look at it all. So this is super, super insightful. And thank you for answering all of those wonderful questions. So for everyone that is still here, the recording will be sent in a follow-up email tomorrow morning. This way you can rewatch the webinar, view all of those answered questions. And of course, like Adam said, if you do have any questions that come up when you're working in Saros, feel free to use the support widget in the bottom right corner of Studio. And then, of course, reach out to support@saros.com through email. But thank you all so much for joining. And again, thank you so much, Adam, for this great webinar. We hope to see you guys at the next one. And I hope you have a great rest of your Thursdays and a great weekend.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.